Hey everybody, welcome to video 8 of the Guitar Chords 101 video course. So far in discussing chord formulas, we've only talked about chords in the root position. And when I say root position, I mean that the chords always have the root note as the bass note, or the note that's the lowest in pitch. But when we take a different note from the chord and play that as the lowest in pitch, we call that an inverted chord. For example, you could play a C major 7 chord with the C not being the lowest note. We could play an E as the lowest note, or a G, or a B. Basically, an inverted chord is a chord that's played in an order other than the note intervals in consecutive order, or the original order of root, third, fifth, and seventh. They have notes other than the root note in the bass. And the more notes you have, obviously the more inversions you can play. Like a triad can be played in the root position, but it can also be played in the first inversion or the second inversion. A seventh chord could be played in the root position, first inversion, second or third inversions. And the first inversion of a chord is played when the root is moved up an octave. And that leaves the third as the bass note. So let me distinguish between a root note and a bass note. The root note is the note that the chord is named after, but the bass note is going to be the lowest note in pitch of the chord. So a C major 7 chord in the first inversion would look like this. You would have a third for the bass note, and the formula would be third, fifth, seventh, and the root on top. The second inversion would be if you repeat this process and move the third up an octave. The formula for that would be fifth, seventh, root, and the third on top. And of course the third inversion would be the seventh, root, third, and the fifth on top. Another way of altering the order of the chord tones is to drop notes down an octave to the bass note of the chord. For example, there's drop 2, drop 3, drop 4 chords. And then there's also combinations as well. You can have drop 2 and 4 voicings. Drop 2 voicings would be where the second note on the music staff from the top of the chord is dropped down an octave. Same thing with a drop 3. It'd be the third note from the top of the chord dropped down an octave in the bass note. And when I say the top of the chord, I mean the top of the notes on the staff. So the formula for this chord is root, seventh, third, and fifth. This would actually be a drop 3 chord of the third inversion because the root note is dropped down to the bass. And if you raise that root note that was dropped, you'd have the formula of seventh, root, third, and fifth, which is the third inversion of a C major 7 chord. And it can also work the other way around, where you have an inversion of a drop chord. So it can get a little confusing, but if you study the formulas and the notes on the staff, it starts to make sense after you think about it. And the reason that these drop chords are so common on the guitar is due to the layout of the notes on the instrument. It's not always easy to play the intervals of the chord in consecutive order like it is on the piano. For example, oftentimes you'll have 2 notes of the same chord on the same string, like the root and the minor third, or a major third and a fifth. Obviously you can only play one note on a string at a time, so that forces us to grab notes from the second octave and the higher strings. So that's about all I'm going to cover on inverted chords and drop chords. In the next video I'm going to discuss the topic of diatonic chords and why it's so important to understand the concepts surrounding that topic when it comes to jazz harmony. So I'll talk to you guys then.